Morning, everyone. My name is Mukund. I'm a partner in our Singapore office leading our real estate infrastructure and construction work, and also a co-author of our McKinsey Global Institute's recently released report on reinventing construction, tackling the global challenge of construction productivity. So what we'd like to do today is take a little bit, absorb a context on why construction is important, why we're all here in the room today. Appreciate the central issue that plagues construction globally, and talk a little bit and initiate the conversation around potential solutions. So let's start with why construction matters. Construction is 13% of global GDP. It is a huge driver of global growth. It is associated with oil and gas, energy, materials, real estate. This is one of the largest economic activities, that drives global growth. One fascinating aspect about construction is the age of mega projects. 1 in 5 projects these days is more than $1 billion in size. Projects have gotten bigger, bolder, as projects grow in scale and scope, risks have tended to multiply, and outcomes have been very, very patchy, both in terms of cost, schedule, as well as quality. So 2 things to appreciate: huge industry and projects getting larger, bigger, ambitious. Which brings us to the central thesis of today's discussion, which is really around construction productivity. This is the biggest issue facing the industry today. The gulf between manufacturing and construction productivity has never been bigger. Manufacturing is roughly 4.5 times more productive than construction. The opportunity, of course, is staggering. We're looking at a number, a recently published report, we can get details offline, is a $1.6 trillion opportunity just by taking construction to the actual economy average. Now, the opportunity is obvious, it's staggering. Productivity, by the way, also equals profits. Our analysis shows that a 10% improvement in productivity for a mid-sized construction firm roughly translates to a 0.5 to 1 percentage point improvement in net profit. So there is, it's not just productivity for the sake of productivity alone. Productivity actually equals profits. And this is particularly true even in a highly productive environment like Singapore, where we are today, where nationwide efforts have boosted productivity in a bunch of other sectors, but construction continues to lag behind. So the averages don't always tell the truth, so we actually went a couple of levels deeper. Construction actually is a sector of 2 distinct halves. There are larger, much more scalable activities, more closer to oil and gas, heavy infrastructure, heavy civil buildings, where productivity averages and productivity growth tends to approach manufacturing productivity. So what you see here in the top right corner is automotive manufacturing productivity and growth in the US. This is an example, but it just shows that there is a set of construction activities that are more productive than the others. The core issue actually is the smaller, more fragmented finishing, plumbing, roofing, those kind of works and trades which suffer from a huge challenge, both in absolute productivity as well as productivity growth. Clearly, the opportunity lies in 3 areas: better integration, better interface management, more investment in upfront planning and design, and smarter use of technology. But at the same time, this is really hard. It's really hard because transforming at the grassroots is a huge challenge, and one that a lot of my fellow real estate practitioners will appreciate. It's never the structural guys, but it's always the finishing guys that are a challenge. We also took a look at countries. Some countries tend to do better than the others. So who are the winners and losers? Now, we plotted construction productivity, absolute, as well as growth across these axes. There are a few countries that are outperformers, where the absolute level is high, as well as the growth is significant. 2 things to note here is that while in general productivity is improving and growing, a worrying number of countries are stuck in low-level traps, such as India and China. And a few others, substantial spenders, are stuck either in declining productivity traps or low growth traps, such as the US, Japan, and Germany, where productivity is either declining or stagnant. Now, while interesting in itself, Singapore is one to note, where we're all sitting here today. Compared to its neighbors in Southeast Asia, Singapore continues to grow its productivity while, despite having a higher starting point. So we'll come back to this on the role of the government and how that could facilitate improvements in productivity. But it just shows that there are outperformers, there are accelerators, and quite a few countries where absolute productivity is low, as well as declining, which is worrying. So as a part of our research, we actually surveyed industry leaders, more than 200 CXOs in the broader construction ecosystem, and we actually spoke to quite a few of them as well on the three sets of root causes that could potentially cause low productivity and productivity growth. The first set is external forces, such as increasing project complexity, extensive regulation, and informality in the market. There are industry-type factors, such as poor contracts and adversarial contracts, changing owner requirements, as well as a very fragmented industry. And there are quite a few firm-level factors, such as inadequate investment in design, poor project management, inadequate investment in training and upskilling, as well as digitization and technology. A few insights. Overall, everyone seemed to agree that the number one reason is a lack of thoughtfulness in investment in upfront planning and design, followed by the adversarial contract regime, where the incentives for owners and contractors are completely miscued. Two areas where broadly people seem to align: projects and sites are getting more and more complex. They're getting larger in scale and scope. And the other area where people aligned is lack of investment in planning and design, upfront planning and design. Two areas, interesting, fascinating areas of misalignment, which is central to the productivity conversation we're having today, is owners think contracts are fair, but contractors do not. And the second is owners feel project management basics in the contractor community are poor. Contractors disagree. The other telling final insight from this is both owners and contractors seem to agree or disagree that the industry underinvests in technology, innovation, and digitization. But the suppliers, who are actually a little removed from the ecosystem, completely disagree. And that is quite telling, where manufacturers of equipment, manufacturers of concrete, building materials, finishing materials, people who are suppliers to the industry and tend to see it from close quarters, feel that the industry is way behind the innovation curve. But industry insiders tend to disagree. I think this is central to our discussion. Coming to the solutions, as always, there are a bunch of levers that can improve productivity, but what is telling here is that there is unfortunately no one blinding insight. There is no silver bullet. If we were to get as productive as manufacturing, there are at least 7 things that need to be fixed, starting from better regulation, more outcome-based regulation, as opposed to monitoring and micromanaging inputs. That's something for governments and regulators to chew on. More collaborative contracts, better and more upfront investment in design and engineering, better supply chain management processes, mimicking manufacturing and other sectors, stronger on-site execution, and technology, which is something that we'll talk about. Given the low base, adoption of technology could potentially be a big win. Or is it? One thing everyone can unanimously agree on today is construction is probably the second least digitized human economic activity. And this is not to say, quite respectfully, all the construction professionals in the room and outside, this is not to say that you are not tech savvy, do not have access to the latest gadgets, and so on. But what it does say is that the rest of the sectors that we can learn from have been innovating at a scorching pace and adopting technology much faster and more holistically, right? In terms of digitizing assets, digitizing people and processes. Reimagining construction, that's the title of our talk today. What is there to reimagine? So the question that our clients ask us is, okay, if manufacturing is the bar, how do we approach manufacturing? How do we be as productive as manufacturing? The simple answer is, let's be more like manufacturing. I mean, while this sounds flippant, there are things that we can learn from. If you were to study the evolution of manufacturing from the last couple of decades, there's been a continuous spate of manufacturing innovation, starting from the lean TQM, the waste elimination in the 70s and 80s, to the outsourcing and offshoring wave in the 1990s, the ERP and supply chain solutions, and starting with more rapid prototyping, automation, robotics in the last decade. And now the conversation is about Industry 4.0, Internet of Things, machine learning, advanced analytics, use of AR and VR. Now, manufacturing story has been one of continuous improvement and innovation. Whereas construction, not to say that there has been no innovation, there has been innovation for sure, starting with the proliferation of high-rises in the 70s, starting to the first wave of planning and design tools in the 90s. One big improvement we can all learn from within the construction community is how safety has improved dramatically. While it is still a huge factor of worry, construction safety has improved, especially in mature markets. Now, where does that leave us in terms of where construction is in the technology adoption curve? Last year, we had spotted 5 integrated construction tech trends. Happy to say that this is not science fiction anymore. We actually see deployments, we're seeing real investments, and plenty of practical use cases. So we talk about how surveying has changed. People are using drones, LiDAR technology. We're seeing the next generation of BIM being deployed, building information management, integrating project management with design. We're seeing an explosion in activity in digital collaboration and mobility. In fact, at GII, we actually have the co-founders and CEOs of several of these startups. You do well to meet them, as well as data analytics and Internet of Things, and better construction technologies, rapid fire design and delivery of projects. So in conclusion, there are a bunch of trade-offs that the industry needs to make. And as with similar industries and similar cusps of innovation that we've seen before, this is something where both owners and contractors need to change. The status quo clearly means that things don't change. Owners, on the other hand, if they innovate first and take the risk and trade off and write innovation into contracts, and contractors don't bite, it's a negative outcome for them. On the other hand, if contractors invest and spend a lot of effort in digital technology and improving productivity, it may lead to higher profits and higher productivity, but then they're unsure of whether the gains will be passed on directly to them or go to the owners and developers. So frankly, this is a classic deadlock where both owners and contractors need to meet halfway to win. And therefore, that's the concluding thought for all of you at GII today. Do think about how both of you can meet halfway, and do think about how technology can play a central role. Thank you.